Imagine a time where during campaigning season one wasn't being bombarded with ads for politicians on various media outlets. This time did in fact exist in the United States, but that all came to a stop in 1952. The election of 1952 wouldn't be remembered for being a particularly close race. In fact, the people of America were fairly united over who they wanted to be their president. President Dwight D. Eisenhower was able to demolish his opposing candidate, Adlai Stevenson, in the Electoral College, winning 442 electoral votes compared to Stevenson's mere 89. No, what would make this election memorable was it being the first election to incorporate television advertisement. One thing is clear to those who studied this election. The 1952 presidential campaign transcended the way politicians campaigned for their position. This election forever changed how public viewed politics as well as each other. In order for us to understand the significance of this election, it is key to understand the basic principles of marketing. As technology has improved, the complexity of marketing has gone up. Pretty much every company that has a product to sell will enforce psychological marketing strategies into the human brain so that we feel the need to buy their product. For example, colors. Colors play a huge role in marketing, and according to Satyendra Singh's review of color psychology in relation to marketing, it was found that people make up their minds about a product within 90 seconds. And 62 through 90% of that decision is based on color alone. This is very important because if an advertiser knows which colors captivate you, they will put those colors in their advertisement and you'll be more likely to buy their product. Advertisement companies will also try and make it seem like there is an urgency to buy their product. What is interesting about both of these techniques is that they are used by presidential campaigns in their own ads to make you feel the need to vote for them. As we can see in the iconic Obama poster, the colors red, white, and blue are heavily implemented. These are the same colors of the American flag. This would suggest that he is a patriotic figure and make people want to vote for him. Here is an example of a fear tactic being put into place by George Bush Sr. This video suggests that Michael Dukakis has no problem with murderers roaming the streets. This would make voters afraid of what Dukakis would do as a president. These strategies would both be very effective as both candidates were elected during these campaigns. Before television advertisement, neither of these strategies would have been implemented. However, since the election of 1952 set a precedent for political advertisements, a new form of campaigning was made. This is a clear example of how communication between the presidents and the people of America changed. For us to understand the immediate context of this event, we must look at what presidential elections before 1952 looked like. Before television advertisement, the president would communicate with the public through the radio and the newspaper. These two elements of media were clearly the roots for television, but neither was as successful for campaigning as television has proved to be. Now, let us look at the event itself. The clip that was just shown was part of Eisenhower's most popular advertisement throughout the campaign. The public enjoyed the catchy theme song and clever animations. This election was much more than just clever animations. The story behind how we got these ads show us just that. Eisenhower was very famous for the way he handled military exploits, and he wanted to find a way to translate his military fame into popularity overall. This is where Rosser Reeves came into play. He was a slick businessman who sold Eisenhower the idea of buying quick 30-second ads to show on television. The reason Reeves presented to Eisenhower was that the ownership in television was skyrocketing, and if he sold ads, loads of people would be able to see them. At first, Eisenhower was unsure, but he eventually caved in and bought the idea. Soon to follow was Stevenson and his campaign. The mistake Stevenson made was that he purchased long 30-minute blocks of advertisement, which were very expensive. To make up for the price, these ads were aired later at night when viewership was much lower. The successful advertisements of Eisenhower helped him win the campaign, as he was able to swing many Democratic voters and provide a much larger voter turnout. Each campaign used some sort of animation in one or more of their ads. Both incorporated catchy songs and jingles. The difference between Eisenhower and Stevenson was that Eisenhower displayed ads where he was talking to the people and answering their questions. This gave people the confidence that Eisenhower would listen to them when he was president. The biggest win for the Eisenhower campaign on television didn't even include Eisenhower. In fact, it focused around his running mate, Richard Nixon. Nixon had been accused of misusing campaign funds to give himself a larger salary. Nixon decided to go onto live television and look America in the eye and tell them he never accepted any gifts or took any bonuses. With his wife on his side, he told a story that caught the American public's eye. It was about how a supporter had given his daughter a dog named Checkers. This speech would end up winning most of the viewers over because of its sincerity, and it helped propel the Eisenhower campaign to a victory. What made the Checkers speech, as it would later be called, so special was the eye contact that Nixon gave the American public. If he had done this speech on the radio or had it been reported by the newspapers, the American public wouldn't have received it the same way. Since he was on live television, he could make himself appear as a man who didn't mean to do anyone any harm. In the early years of politicians using advertisement for their campaigns, the left and the right could see eye to eye on many issues. Data shows that in 1958, 73% of people were able to trust the government even if their choice of elected official wasn't in office. In 2019, only 17% of people can say that they trust the government. The percentages of people has gone down every year since 2001, when it spiked up following the events of 9/11. The slide up right now shows what Republicans think of Democrats. This next slide shows what Democrats think of Republicans. Finally, 73% of Democrats and Republicans believe that they can't agree on basic facts. The significance of this new divide is huge. It now becomes much harder to run a country if both sides feel that the other doesn't want the same thing as them. One thing is clear. The chart shown on the screen shows how much money has been poured into political advertisement. This shows a clear example of change in communication. The campaign groups have clearly shifted in strategy and how they want to communicate to the public what their candidate looks like. The graph shown below accounts for inflation and shows how much each party has poured into their advertisement for their respective presidential and congressional candidates. This next picture shows the total of the costs of each election for each party. What is interesting is that when a party spends a considerably larger amount of money into advertisement than the other party, they have won the election. We can see this in the years 2000, 2008, and 2020. This shows how important advertisement has become for communication to the public. Finally, when looking at the effects of political advertisement, one cannot ignore the elephant in the room: social media. Access has become a lot easier to come across through social media, where 70% of Americans have an account, and that number is only increasing, having a 3.1 increase from 2019 to 2020. However, there is a negative to all this information: fake news. I'm sure we've all heard of fake news and wondered what the danger behind it could be. According to an article published on PBS, accurate stories rarely reach more than 1,000 people, yet the most prominent false news items routinely reach between 1,000 people and 100,000 people. It is important to understand that most people want what is best for the country and that we shouldn't let ourselves continue to be divided. At the end of the day, the best thing we can do is sit down and discuss these issues with each other.